rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with Endtime Ministries, and I want to welcome you to Tuesday's edition of End of the Age. You know, we've talked a lot of times about the two prophecies that are just ahead of us on God's prophetic timeline. We know the first one is there's a peace agreement that's going to be signed in the Middle East that will start the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ. The second one is a war that will kill 1/3 of the world's population. It's found in Revelation chapter 9, verse 13 through 21, and we call it the sixth trumpet war. You understand the 7 trumpets in the book of Revelation. Well, the sixth trumpet is this war. The first 5 trumpets have already occurred, and if you go on the prophetic timeline from Daniel chapter 2 all the way to Revelation 22, you follow the timeline, you know that these next 2 events they're the next 2 prophecies that will occur on God's prophetic timeline. Well, yesterday, Irvin talked about the peace agreement and kind of give you an update on what they're trying to do on May 30th, which now that May 30th date has been postponed to this summer because they want John Kerry and the United States to be involved in that. So the May 30th date has been postponed till this summer sometime. But what I'm going to do today on this program is to give you an update on the Sixth Trumpet War and the possibility of ISIS being involved in that war. And the reason I wanted to do that is because you have a lot of different skirmishes. I mean, for years we've had conflict in the Middle East. And we've reported on each one because we know the war is the next thing to happen, but we don't know specifically what is going to spark the war. It could be Israel attacking Iran over their nuclear program. It could have been the civil war in Syria. A lot of different things have been going on, but we didn't know for sure what would spark the war that would end up killing 1/3 of the world's population. We know it's just ahead of us. We actually could already be fighting the war, but we still don't know what would be the spark that would set it off. And so I wanted to give you, since Irvin talked about the peace agreement yesterday, I wanted to talk today about the war because it's very critical you understand ISIS's role. Now, the reason I wanted to bring it up, one of the main points is that what ISIS is doing is not a civil war. The difference with ISIS and other conflicts is that ISIS is obviously what they're doing. They're not trying to protect a region. They are, or the specific country. ISIS has an ultimate goal of total world domination and the global implementation of Sharia law. So it's a whole different ballgame when you're dealing with ISIS. And as we go throughout the program, you're going to see that. It's like nothing the Middle East has seen in years, hundreds of years. And so we're going to look at ISIS today, and I'm going to give you an update on what we feel could be the beginnings of this Sixth Trumpet War, if we're not in it already. Now, obviously, ISIS could go off the scene tomorrow. It's highly unlikely, but I mean, anything could happen. But it's highly unlikely that that's going to happen. And as you'll go throughout the program, you'll see that ISIS is not going away. If you defeat them here, they'll just move over here. Like I said, they're not trying to protect a specific plot of land. Their goal is world domination. So if you defeat them in Iraq, they'll move to Iran. If you defeat them in Iran, they'll move to Afghanistan. They're going to move around because their goal is total world domination. So we're going to talk about ISIS and the possibility of them being involved in this Sixth Trumpet War. So I've got a few articles that I want to read right off the bat because ISIS is expanding. ISIS is not being defeated. I know our government and everybody likes to talk about, well, hey, we're defeating ISIS and we've conquered them and you know, they're becoming contained. ISIS is not contained. And we're going to talk about that on today's program. So, a few articles I wanted to go over just to give you an idea where I'm coming from. The first one comes from Debka, and it says, ISIS to Israel, we're coming very soon. The article states that according to Debka, within the last couple weeks, ISIS commands in the Middle East and that the terrorist organization simultaneously released at least 10 videos that it said showed ISIS forces on their way to attack targets in Israel. It's a propaganda videos. They threatened Israel with an impending attack, saying, we're coming and we're coming very soon, accompanied by the images of fighters from the ISIS affiliate in the Sinai. So it was not the first time for the ISIS propaganda machine to threaten hostilities against Israel, but it was for the first time the threat to be issued simultaneously from every province or city where ISIS is located in the Middle East. The videos included ones from Raqqa, the ISIS capital in Syria, Mosul, the terrorist organization's capital in Iraq, the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, Derna in eastern Libya and central Libya. So they're getting these videos from all over the place saying, hey, we're on our way, Israel. Debka's sources report that every video contains the following sentences. We know that the Egyptian army is being helped by Israeli intelligence and the Israeli Air Force in its war against us. We also know that Israel set up intelligence networks within the population of the Bedouin tribes in the Sinai. And from now on, we will take action against Egyptian and Israeli targets as one. So even though we've defeated ISIS in a few certain areas, it doesn't mean that we have conquered ISIS. They're saying that, hey, if you conquer us here, we're going to move down here. And Israel, since we found out that you're involved in what's going on with Sinai and with Egypt, we're coming for you as well. Because remember, the goal of ISIS, the ultimate goal, is total world domination and the implementation of Sharia law around the world. The next article comes from the New York Times, and it states ISIS expands their reach despite military and financial setbacks. It goes on to state American airstrikes have killed 25,000 Islamic State fighters in Iraq and Syria and incinerated millions of dollars plundered by the militants, according to the Pentagon officials. Iraqi and Kurdish forces have also taken back 40% of the militant group's land in Iraq. The officials say, and forces backed by the West have seized a sizable amount of territory in Syria that had been controlled by the Islamic State, also known obviously as ISIS or ISIL. But here's the key point. The battlefield successes enjoyed by Western-backed forces in the Islamic State's heartland have done little to stop the expansion of the militants into Europe, to North Africa and Afghanistan. The attacks this year in Brussels, Istanbul, and other cities only reinforce the sense of a terrorist group on the march, and among American officials and military experts, there is renewed caution in predicting progress in a fight that they say is likely to go on for years because they can't pin them down. If you beat them here, they'll just move over here. Because remember, they're not trying to protect one specific plot of land. Total world domination is their goal. The article goes on to say that Deputy Secretary of State Anthony Blinken told a congressional committee on Tuesday concerning the Islamic State, we know that to be fully effective, we must work to prevent the spread and violent extremism in the first place, to stop recruitment, radicalization, and mobilization of people, especially young people, that engage in terrorist activities. Jonathan Schanzer, a former terrorism finance analyst at the Treasury Department, who is now with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in Washington, stated, you can defeat ISIS in ISIS-controlled territories, but you're not going to defeat ISIS itself, because the idea of jihadism, or a holy war, continues to evolve and continues to exist. So he's making my point right here. You can defeat them here, they'll just move over here. And as we go through the program, you're going to see that ISIS already has power bases in over 35 nations, including the United States. So you defeat them here, they'll move over here. Because they don't care about that. They'll give up land here, they'll move down here, they'll move over here, because they're not trying, it's not a civil war with them. They're trying to fight, their goal is world domination. So again, the difference with ISIS and other conflicts is that ISIS, it's not a civil war. They're not trying to just protect a specific country or region. ISIS has an ultimate goal of total world domination and the global implementation of Sharia law. Now, before we get done with the program, I want to make sure you remember that, because you can hear about ISIS on the news and you think, well, that's 10,000 miles away over in the Middle East. Well, what I'm talking about today is a war that's going to originate in the Euphrates River region, which is housed in Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. And the Bible says before it's over with, before the smoke clears from that war, that 1/3 of the world's population is going to be destroyed. So it's going to be something that starts in that region, but yet it's going to spread to a lot of nations around the world. And we see it happening already with ISIS. Now, think about Bashar Assad and what's going on with the civil war in Syria. And look at the difference in what's going on there and what's going on with ISIS. Whole different ballgame. Bashar Assad's trying to protect his territory in Syria. But ISIS wants world domination. It's a whole different ballgame with them. The next article comes from RT, and it says, Terrorist International. ISIS has 33,000 combatants, and it strives for a global reach. The article goes on to say that ISIS has considerable manpower, heavy armor, and air defenses in the Middle East, and is striving to extend its reach into Europe, Africa, Central and Southeast Asia, and it's hoping to become a terrorist international organization, which was told to us by a senior Russian military officer. It goes on to state that ISIS militants are well armed with tanks, armored personnel carriers, anti-tank and anti-aircraft missiles, including man-portable air defense systems. It states that terror threats in Europe have significantly increased, and EU nationals who went to the Middle East to fight alongside ISIS are now coming back, ready to utilize their experience. They're coming back to Europe now to utilize their experience that they got in the Middle East in terrorist activity. According to recent assessment, more than 800 jihadists have returned to Germany over the past 4 years. With a tense situation persisting in areas inhabited by Islamic diasporas in Austria, Belgium, France, and other Western European countries. They're coming back to apply their trade. Moreover, they try to finance their activities by running illegal migration and drug trafficking routes into Europe. Besides Europe, ISIS deliberately advances into Central Asia. ISIS is building up its units in the region and set up a whole network of training camps across Afghanistan and beyond. In Africa, Islamic State relies on its ally Boko Haram, an 8,000 strong Islamist group in Nigeria. But another pressing challenge that arises is the Islamic State's pivot towards Southeast Asia. ISIS leaders are looking forward to include in the Caliphate territories in Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and the Philippines. So remember what I said, it'll start there in the Middle East region, but it's spreading all over the place worldwide. And in moving into these countries, it's extending their influence over the entire region with a population of over 250 million Muslims. So you can see that if you defeat them in Iraq, like one of the articles said, we've defeated 40% of them in Iraq. They don't care. They'll just move out of that area and move into some of the other areas because the goal is total world domination. And we're talking about, think about this, what I'm telling you, in view of the Sixth Trumpet War. The next article, and I think my final article, is Africa is part of ISIS's global strategy. It comes from DefenseWeb. It says that the continent of Africa is at the center of a three-pronged quest for worldwide jihad, or a worldwide holy war. ISIS is advancing its plans for a worldwide caliphate on three simultaneous fronts. Imagine, says Harleen Gambier, a counterterrorism analyst at the Institute for the Study of War, a strategy organized in 3 concentric rings. Number 1, the group is fighting to hold and expand its territory in Iraq and Syria. Sure, they'd like to conquer that because they're trying to set up a caliphate in that region, but it doesn't stop there. Number 2, next it is fostering disorder and standing up against affiliates in what she calls the near abroad of the wider Middle East and North Africa. Finally, ISIS militants plan to launch terrorist attacks in the far abroad of the West, Australia, and Southeast Asia. She goes on to say that ISIS gains influence in areas of disorder and conflict by exacerbating existing fissures in states and communities. ISIS's opponents thus are forced to counter the organization's ground presence in Iraq and Syria, as well as its ability to expand and recruit across the globe. This is a substantial task that involves coherent yet geographically dispersed efforts, likely coordinated among multiple allies. Some of that potential for new recruits already is being seen. At least a dozen students from the University of Medical Sciences and Technology in Khartoum left Sudan for Turkey on their way to Syria in June of 2015. The students, which were citizens of Canada, the United Kingdom, and the United States, are considered prime pickings for ISIS because they're well educated, they don't need money, and they carry foreign passports already. So they're prime candidates for the ISIS fighters to recruit them. Also, recruiting foreign people, as they are called, has been one of the many keys to the success of ISIS. The article states that it is also something the group boasts because they boast about it because its leaders believe it is a major insult to Western governments if their own citizens, who presumably lead fulfilling lives in the West, risk it all to fight with ISIS in Syria and Iraq. The ISIS leadership also uses foreign fighters as evidence that their so-called caliphate is a viable alternative to Western ideology. So one final time, the difference with ISIS and other conflicts is that ISIS is not fighting a civil war. They're not trying to just protect a specific country or a region. Their ultimate goal is total world domination and the global implementation of Sharia law. So, with that said, let me talk to you about the Sixth Trumpet War or World War II and ISIS. So let me try to marry all this together, and then before the end of the program's over, I'll give you what's specifically going on in the Middle East. We've talked about their global reach and what they want to do, but I'll give you an update on what's going on in the Middle East right now. So the Sixth Trumpet War is the same prophecy as the Euphrates River War. Of course, we commonly refer to it on this program as World War III, because World War II, World War I, World War II was the first and second trumpet. This is the sixth trumpet, and the Bible prophesies that this war will kill 40 times World War II. So we call it here World War III. It is foretold in Revelation 9, verse 13 through 16, and it states, "And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying to the sixth angel, which had the trumpet, Loose the four angels, which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour a day, and a month and a year, for to slay the third part of men. And the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000, and I heard the number of them." So this prophecy tells us three specific things. Number one, this war will start in the Euphrates River region. Number two, 1/3 of the human race will be destroyed as a result of this war. And number three, an army of 200 million soldiers will participate in this war. So think about this. In terms of decimation, other than Noah's flood, which killed everybody on the earth besides 8 living souls, it would be the most catastrophic and deadly event humans have ever experienced in the history of the world. Nothing else has even come close to this. At the time, the death toll of World War I, or the Great War, which is what it was called, far surpassed any prior war with 8.2 million casualties. In an effort to eliminate the possibility of a world war ever happening again, the League of Nations was formed at that time. However, The U.S. Congress hesitated at the idea of being part of a world government, which is how many viewed the international organization, and then realizing that the United States would have to in many ways surrender U.S. sovereignty, they voted against it. And since the U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, who had championed the idea of the League of Nations, could not carry his own government into that entity, it quickly dismantled and fell apart. Well, 20 years later, the unthinkable happened and World War II occurs. And with the death toll from this war standing at 52 million, the cry for world security became louder than ever. Well, of course, the prevention of a third world war ever happening was the main reason given for the second attempt at a global governmental structure, which of course we know today as the United Nations. The publicized concept of this entity is to have a place where nations can, rather than going to war, they come to settle their disputes in a more diplomatic way. Well, thankfully, for the last 70 plus years, we have not had a world war. We've had Vietnam and some different things, but not a world war. The problem is, all of that's about to change according to the Bible. We have this prophecy of a future war which will kill 1/3 of mankind, or just over 2 billion, with a B, billion people. Of course, that's 40 times World War II. Now, it is and obviously, like I said before, it's the next prophetic event to occur on God's prophetic time clock. How do we know this? Well, the prophecy of the 7 trumpets. It's mentioned in the book of Revelation, and it spans Revelation 8:7 through Revelation 11:19. In these scriptures, John was given a vision of a series of events that would occur when 7 angels sounded their 7 trumpets. Well, having studied these prophecies for years, it's our opinion that the first 5 angels have already blown their trumpets, and those events have already taken place. That means that the 6th trumpet, which is the Euphrates River War, or World War III, is the next prophecy to be fulfilled on God's prophetic timeline. So let me recap. I know I'm coming up to the bottom of the hour. Let me recap what we've talked about already, because it's very key. And then we'll get into the rest of the program, some of the history about what's really going on right now, and some of the history of ISIS and where it came from, who started it, this, that, and the other. So when you talk about this 6th trumpet war, like I said, the prophecy gives us 3 specific things to look for. It's going to be fought in the Middle East region. It's going to be fought right there along the Euphrates River, which is housed in Syria. It starts in Turkey, flows down through Syria, through Iraq, and into the last 60 miles goes right along the border of Iraq and flows out into the Persian Gulf. So you're looking at, the Bible says, loose the 4 angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. So it's going to start in the Euphrates River region, which of course is where ISIS started. And then it's the Bible says that the second thing, there's going to be, it starts in the Euphrates region. 1/3 of, when the smoke clears, 1/3 of the world's population is going to be destroyed. So it's not just going to destroy a lot of people in that region. There's going to be other major players that come into the war. Well, how's that going to happen? We used to think that, hey, you know, everybody from around the world is going to send all their armies there and they're all going to fight right there. Well, that's highly unlikely. What's going to happen is this war is going to spread to other nations. Well, when you look at ISIS, they're not, when I say it's not a civil war, in other words, to go in and conquer them, let's say they were trying to protect Iraq. We go in there and conquer them, set up a new government in Iraq, it's over. Problem is that's not their goal. Their goal is world domination. We want Sharia law implemented worldwide. So if we see we're going to get defeated in Iraq, we'll move to Afghanistan. If we see we're going to get conquered there, we'll move into northern Africa. Or we might go to Australia. Or we might go to Europe or the United States. Because their goal is world domination. That's the goal. So that's the difference, and that's why I'm talking to you about it today. You say, well, Dave, do you know 100% that ISIS is going to be what starts World War III? No, I don't. I can't prove that 100%. Somebody may come on the scene tomorrow that starts World War III. The thing is, it's highly unlikely, because We haven't seen anything like ISIS really ever. I mean, if you look at it, they're willing to move wherever and do whatever they can, and they already have power bases set up. There are people coming from the United States to go over there and fight with ISIS. And as much as I can't believe that, it's happening. I just read to you about articles where people have came from Canada and the United States and Europe to go down there and fight with them. Somehow or another, they recruited them to come over there and fight. And so it's going to end up being a worldwide war. A lot of countries will be affected. And so it's going to start in the Euphrates River region. 1/3 of the world's population is going to be destroyed. And an army of 200 million soldiers will be involved in the war, according to the prophecy. So we know that there are 3 entities on earth that could field an army of 200 million men. China, India, and the Islamic world. Each one of those 3 entities could field an army of 200 million men. But think about it. The Bible doesn't say 200 million men are going to be killed. The Bible says 1/3 of the world's population, over 2 billion people. So it's very key that we understand ISIS is not fighting a civil war. The ultimate goal of ISIS is total world domination. So when you hear about ISIS on the news and you think, well, that's 8, 10,000, 12,000 miles away over there, clear over there in the Middle East, that's not their goal. That's just where it's started. Their goal's world domination. Now, I know we're coming up to the end of the break, and a lot of you guys can only watch the first 30 minutes of the program. If you want to finish the rest of the program with me, you can go to endtime.com, endtime.com, and watch the whole program, because I've got a lot of information that's coming up in the last 30 minutes. A lot of history about ISIS, how it got started, who started it, and you're going to want to know this, because before it's over with, the mess that's going on over there could come over here. It might be here already. So we'll learn about it in the last part of the program.
When current events are found in Bible prophecy, it's astonishing. At Endtime Ministries, we are seeing them unfold every day, and so can you. We've put together a current events in Bible prophecy package for anyone who wants to understand like never before. Irvin Baxter and his dedicated staff have spent hundreds of hours of research and study, and in doing so have discovered that current events in Bible prophecy are telling the same story. These 13 DVDs will prepare you to be ready in this extraordinary time that God has destined you to live. Call 1-800-ENDTIME or go to endtime.com and save over 20% when you buy the current events in Bible prophecy package.
All my life I have heard the statement, nobody's perfect. But one day Hebrews 10:14 caught my attention. It says, "For by one offering he hath perfected forever them that are sanctified." I attempted to reconcile this statement with what I had viewed as the many imperfections in myself. Could it be that there are human beings on this earth that God considers perfect? In You Are Perfect, Irvin Baxter explains what it means to be sanctified and why God sees those that are sanctified as perfect. This teaching has given people peace and security in their walk with God because of new understanding of how God sees them. This lesson is available on DVD, CD, in printed format, or even digital download. To tell you not what's wrong with you, but what's right with you. You are perfect. Call 1-800-ENDTIME or go to endtime.com to get yours today.
If your radio station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com to continue to listen to today's broadcast.
Well, welcome back, everybody. And it's very key that we talk about what's going on in the Middle East right now, because remember, like I said, the next 2 prophetic events to occur on God's prophetic timeline is the war that will kill 1/3 of the world's population, which is what we're discussing today, and it's the peace agreement that Irvin discussed yesterday. He gave you an update about what was going to go on May 30th, which has now been bumped out to this summer sometime, and what France is trying to do to get maybe a United Nations resolution against the Palestinians and the Israelis, and maybe get a peace situation going on there. But those are the next two things on God's prophetic timeline. So Irvin talked about the peace agreement yesterday. I'm talking about the sixth trumpet war today, because we haven't seen anything like ISIS in really ever. We've never seen anything like this, where they're just willing to say, okay, yeah, you guys, we'll fight for this and get this little bit of land. If you defeat us here, we'll move into another region. We'll move here. We're going over here, because it's not a civil war. We're talking about total world domination. That is their goal, a caliphate over the entire world, and Sharia law implemented worldwide. Have you heard about Sharia law here in the United States? Absolutely. They're trying to get it implemented here now in many ways. And that'll be a topic for another program. I don't really have time to go through all that today, but they're trying it here in the United States already. You've heard about it. You can go to Google and look it up. There's hundreds of articles on it. So we're talking today about the sixth trumpet war and the possibility of ISIS's involvement in that. So we know that there's a war coming that's going to kill 1/3 of the world's population. It's going to start in the Middle East region, and it's going to have an army of 200 million men involved in that war. So what will start the war? A lot of people have already talked about it. So remember, this war has to emanate from the Euphrates River region. Well, over the last 2 years, ISIS has captured over 40% of the Euphrates River. Now remember, what the Bible said is that it has to loose the 4 angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. So the Euphrates, again, is housed in Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. And over the last 2 years, ISIS has captured 40% of the Euphrates River. Go look at a map. See what all they've captured. And then in this war against ISIS, Russia's fighting on the western side of the Euphrates River, and the United States is fighting on the eastern side. So even though Vladimir Putin, you've heard about it, that he's decided to withdraw Russian troops, he will still keep a military presence in the port of Tartus and at the Khmeim Air Base, which is where Russia has launched most of their airstrikes recently over the last several months. So he's also going to leave the S-400 air defense missile system in Syria, which is designed to bring down commercial and fighter aircraft. So this scenario means that with the United States on the east side of the Euphrates River in that region up there, and Russia on the west side, this scenario means that the 2 greatest nuclear powers on earth are positioned near the Euphrates River at this time. 65 nations have also joined together with the United States in an effort to defeat ISIS. Now, some of them nations are still there fighting. Some of them aren't at this point. So ISIS is not only fighting in the Middle East, but has also established power bases in over 35 nations around the world. It's spreading like a horrible contagious virus. You can't get rid of it. And it's simply not going to go away. And that's my point. This is not a civil war. They're not just trying to conquer one region. I have to stress that. Because it's not, you've heard about Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, all of those guys have given their status on what they're going to do when they become president. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to handle ISIS. If it were that easy, that would be awesome. Go in there and just conquer them. Go in there and we've talked about them carpet bombing them, and there's all kinds of different scenarios. The problem is ISIS, they can just move. They'll move out of that area and move into another one because they're looking for an international organization of terrorism. They're looking for global domination and Sharia law implemented worldwide. That's the ultimate goal. So there's also the potential for another terror attack on the United States. And obviously that would possibly, it could be carried out by the terrorist from the Euphrates River region. Donald Trump has spoke about it. He's saying that he actually said we need to put a halt on these terrorists or Islamic people coming in, because if we bring all these immigrants in, terrorists could come with them. So another huge attack, let's say another a situation like a 911. If something like that happened again, that could be the spark. The war could have already started, but something's going to spark that war to where it escalates to the point that 1/3 of the world's population is going to be destroyed. Another 9/11 attack on the United States with a new president who wasn't so apologetic for the foreign policy of the United States. It could be the spark that starts the escalation of the war. Perhaps Israel will attack Iran. I'm just going through a few different scenarios here real quick. Perhaps Israel will attack Iran. Rumors say Israel may actually do this before Iran is finally able to build a nuclear weapon. Israel knows one bomb will destroy their country. Recently, Iran reportedly test-fired 2 ballistic missiles with the phrase, "Israel must be wiped out," written in Hebrew and Farsi on them as a show of force by the Islamic Republic. Well, if I knew they were trying to wipe me out and they were trying to develop a nuclear weapon, would I attack them ahead of time? Israel's already attacked them once over a nuclear program. You think they'd do it again? Absolutely. Would we be in World War III tomorrow morning if they did it? Absolutely. That's another scenario that could start the escalation of this war. At this point, obviously we can't be sure. It's all speculation what will start the war. However, we do know that it will start very soon in the Euphrates River region if it is not started already. But for the sake of this program, let's focus on ISIS. So, the crisis called ISIS, what will happen? Well, obviously, we all hoped it would eventually subside and go away. Instead, it's escalating, it's growing. We've thought, hey, we can go in there and just conquer them. We found out it's not that easy because they're going all over the place. They're setting up power bases all over. It's not like an island in Japan where we can just go conquer the island and say, hey, we won. It's not like that because they just don't want that island. They just don't want the Euphrates River region. They do want that, but that's not all they want. They want total world domination. So they're willing to give up a little land here to go get some somewhere else. Then they're willing to give up a little bit there to go get some over here, wreaking havoc all along the way in this international terrorist organization they're trying to establish. So the seeds of this crisis have really been being sown for many years. While most of us slept, haven't followed it at all, Islamists dreamed of the day that a caliphate could be established on the earth. They yearned for the day when Islam and Sharia law obviously would rule the world. I'm driving that point home today on this program. It's their idea of Islamic destiny. So let me just give you a little history here because it's very, very important. In or about the year 570, the child who would be named Muhammad and who would become the prophet of Islam was born into a family belonging to a clan of Quraysh, the ruling tribe of Mecca, a city in the Hijaz region in northwestern Arabia. When he was in his 40s, Muhammad began to retire to meditate in a cave on Mount Hira, just outside of Mecca, where he claimed the angel Gabriel appeared to him. Well, this began many sessions of meditation, which ultimately resulted in the writing of the Quran, Islam's holy book. Muhammad began to preach the things that he had come to believe and soon acquired a considerable following. As the new religion called Islam became stronger, Muhammad assembled armies and began to make war against those who resisted his teachings. So, from the beginning, the writings of Muhammad declared that it was Islam's destiny to rule the world. Here's 2 examples of that. Number 1, Allah says in the Quran, it is He, or Allah, who has sent His messenger with guidance and the religion of truth in order for it to be dominant over all other religions, even though mushrikun, or disbelievers, hate it. Number 2, it states, and the messenger, Muhammad, said, verily Allah has shown me the eastern and western part of the earth, and I saw the authority of my ummah, or the nation, dominate all that I saw. So they're talking about total world dominations over the earth and over every other religion. Furthermore, the Quran teaches, or Quran, however you want to say it, that the religion of Islam should be spread by force if necessary. Here are some quotes from the Quran that state that. Number one, Allah is an enemy to unbelievers. Number two, slay them wherever you find them and drive them out of the places whence they drove you out, for persecution is worse than slaughter. Number three, fighting is obligatory for you as much as you dislike it. So they're trying to spread their Islamic doctrine, Sharia law, all around the world. That's the goal. So the history of Islam, let's talk about the history of Islam from Muhammad then to World War I. After the death of Muhammad, Islam continued to spread throughout the world. Over the next 1,282 years, Islam grew its influence by proselytizing and by war. During this time, many caliphs ruled over many caliphates, all claiming to bear the banner of Muhammad. The Ottoman Empire, also known as the Turkish Empire, was founded in 1299 by Oghuz Turks. During the 16th and 17th centuries, in particular, at the height of its power under the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent, the Ottoman Empire was a multinational, multilingual empire controlling much of the Southeast Europe, Western Asia, the Caucasus, North Africa, and the Horn of Africa. When World War I broke out in 1914, the Ottoman Empire, led by the Turks, entered the war on the side of the Germans. When Germany and the Turks defeated the vast area of Palestine, of course, that had been under Ottoman control for so long, it was transferred to the authority of Great Britain and became known, what we know now as the British Mandate. Then on March 3rd, 1924, the caliphate was officially abolished. Now, it's very key that we understand that this is what got some of these people so riled up, because their goal was total world domination. Remember, you can go read it in the Quran. Total world domination, that's the goal. Then they were defeated and there was no caliphate left. And so a lot of these people and it started to stew. Hold on a minute. Our holy book says that we're supposed to have world domination, Sharia law throughout the world, Islamic doctrine throughout the world, and yet now we have nothing. It's all been split up. Look at the Middle East. It was all split up in different regions. They didn't have a caliph or a caliphate. And so they began to stew. And when I get back from the break, we'll find out what the results of all that were, because you'll find out how we got to where we're at now from that point and how they were stewing on it. It was infuriating them all these years to where it finally blew up on them.
One day I was listening to End of the Age, much like you are now, when a commercial came on about the Salvation Package. It's a set of 4 DVDs in which Irvin teaches about topics like Nicodemus' question to Jesus, "What must I do to be born again?" I remember Irvin said in the commercial, "If you don't love the truth, don't get this because it will make you mad." Well, I was hungry for the truth, so I did get it, and I'm so glad I did. I'd been studying the Bible for many years, but learned there was more in the scriptures about what it means to be born again. When the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "What will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" Jesus said, "Take heed of false teaching, for many will come in my name and deceive many." Now I know what Jesus was talking about when he made that statement, and I won't be deceived. The Salvation Package changed my life and my eternity. I'm so thankful for that commercial I heard. That's why today I wanted to record one too, for someone out there listening, searching for the truth. You will find it in the Salvation Package. Get the 4 DVD set for $65 or the individual DVDs for $20 each.
So you understand that the goal of Islam was total world domination, and yet after World War I, they were defeated. The Ottoman Empire was defeated, and they were left with nothing at that point, no caliph and no caliphate. And so they began to stew on that, and it really played a part in what happened just a few years ago. So let me get to that point. I'll take you from there to here real quick, and you can understand what's going on really with ISIS. A world without a caliph or a caliphate. So with no recognized leader and no caliphate, over the next almost 100 years, Islam's influence in world affairs basically took a back seat to the two new nuclear superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. However, the belief, as taught by Muhammad, that Islam should rule over the world, it never died. They sit stewing on it this whole time. So it was merely put on hold until the winds of history might once again blow in Islam's favor. So the turning point came just a few years ago when President George Bush, H.W. Bush, led a coalition of forces against Saddam Hussein in 1991. Y'all understand the Iraq War with Saddam Hussein. When Osama bin Laden saw Western troops encamped on the sacred soil of Islam, he was enraged and began to plot how he could exact revenge upon the United States. His plan culminated on September 11th, 2001, when Muslim terrorists hijacked 4 airplanes. Many of you know already, 2 of them were flown into the trade towers in New York. 1 of them was flown into the Pentagon, and 1, which appeared to be headed for the White House, crashed and was shot down. So as a result of the attacks, 2,996 people were killed. Well, of course, President George W. Bush quickly responded by announcing his war on terror. On March 20, 2003, the Bush administration launched the invasion of Iraq. Saddam Hussein was hanged, his Ba'athist party outlawed, and officials that had served under Hussein were banished from power. As a result of excluding from government those who had run Iraq for the last 24 years, a large number of governmental officials and military personnel were left without a means of supporting themselves and their families. Well, on December 18, 2010, the Arab Spring began in Tunisia with the Tunisian Revolution, and it spread throughout the countries of the Arab League. When the uprising came to Syria in 2011, the Sunni Arabs that had previously served under Saddam Hussein saw an opportunity to fight against Syria's Bashar al-Assad, of course, who was Shia. Well, with the help of Iran, also Shia, Assad was able to hold on to power. But by 2014, a new menace had surfaced on the Middle East landscape: ISIS. Between the spring of 2014 and the beginning of 2016, ISIS, which of course many of us now know as the Islamic State or of Iraq and Syria, captured control of 70% of Syria and 40% of Iraq, giving the terrorist organization control of more territory than all of Great Britain. Then on June 29, 2014, ISIS announced the formation of a new caliphate and the emergence of a new caliph, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. ISIS then claimed all Muslims in the world should give their allegiance to the new caliph. Remember, it's world domination. That's the goal. At the same time, ISIS changed its name to the Islamic State. The Islamic State quickly became known for its extreme brutality. Hundreds of people were beheaded, with videos being placed online in order to spread the terror of the IS around the world. A Jordanian pilot was placed in a cage and set on fire. Many of you have seen these. You can go on YouTube and watch some of them. Several people were placed in a cage and then slowly lowered into the water until they drowned. All of it caught on video and displayed online for the world to see. Well, since the Islamic State had captured the oil-rich area of Syria and northern Iraq, the IS quickly became the wealthiest terrorist organization the world had ever known. The most remarkable thing about the rapid rise of the IS was the speed with which the Islamic State was able to set up government in new territories that it captured. Within 30 days of taking over a city or an area, schools were functioning, hospitals were operating, and governmental functions were established. The world marveled at the military know-how and the governmental ability of the terrorist organization. Well, slowly the truth emerged. many of the former military leaders and governmental officials that had served under Saddam Hussein and who had been banished from the power by the Americans had found a place to utilize their military and governmental ability. Many of them had become leaders in the new Islamic State. So by going in and killing Saddam Hussein, we in turn actually helped to create ISIS. Is the Islamic State practicing Quran at this time? Well, with all of the different atrocities that they're doing, is that in the Quran? In the Quran? Well, from beheading those who refuse to convert to Islam, to forcibly subjecting girls and women to sexual slavery, to the implementation of Sharia law in every place it had gained power, the Islamic State quoted verses from the Quran to justify its actions, even though there were Muslims who condemned the actions of the IS. Most of the Islamic world remained strangely silent as the black scourge with its black flag consolidated power in the territories it had gained. Is it contained or escalating? Obama claims that it's contained. Well, the world's two foremost nuclear powers, Russia and the United States, have used their superior air power in an attempt to defeat the Islamic State. President Obama claims that ISIS is now under control. Yet the attacks of the Islamic State continue, and now they've even escalated from Paris to San Bernardino to Brussels and around the world. Terrorist attacks are claimed by the IS, and they continue. Besides its base in Syria and Iraq, listen at this. The Islamic State has now established a presence in Libya, Egypt, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Algeria, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Tunisia, Germany, France, England, Belgium, and yes, even the United States. So the IS is like a virus, and it's spreading so rapidly that it threatens to become an epidemic. So here's the question. What will happen with the crisis called ISIS? Well, while the world's two superpowers hope the scourge called ISIS will just go away, it appears it's not going to happen. Will the conflict between the believers in Islamic world domination and the West, is it going to just go away? Or will it end up becoming the clash of civilizations? Remember, there's a war just ahead of us. It's found in Revelation 9, 13 through 16. You can read for yourself. It states that it prophesies a war that will emanate from the Euphrates River region. Remember, we went in and took Saddam Hussein out of power, and that's mainly what created ISIS. And that's the Euphrates River region. The Euphrates River is housed in Turkey, Syria, mainly in Iraq and Iran, just at the very bottom. And this war will emanate from the Euphrates River, and it will end up killing 1/3 of mankind. So the Islamic State's power base is up and down the Euphrates River at this time. So you say, well, why talk about it now? Well, just like we said before, the 7 trumpets in the book of Revelation. The first trumpet, World War I. Now, I don't have time to prove all these. We've talked about them a lot on a radio program. You can go read about it on our website, but we can prove that the first 5 of the 7 trumpets have already occurred. The first one was World War I. The second, World War II. The third was the Chernobyl nuclear accident in 1986. The fourth one was the tearing down of the Berlin Wall in 1989, and that was the speeding up of time, the process of globalization. A lot of other things happened at that point. And then the fifth one was the Iraq War with Saddam Hussein, which aided in the creation of ISIS. When we took Saddam Hussein out of power, a lot of those people in his government, they were instrumental in starting ISIS. So a question that I have and that I get all the time is that, well, we see this 6 trumpet war coming. It could be ISIS. It could be us fighting ISIS around the world before all this thing blows up. Who knows what's going to happen? But we know the war's coming. And ISIS isn't just going to go away. It's not something that we can just go in and conquer. I know that future President Trump or future President Clinton or future President Sanders would like to say, I'm just going to go in there and bomb them and it's going to be over with. That's not how it works. They've got power bases in 35 countries around the world now. So it's not just going to go away overnight. So the question I get a lot is, you see this sixth trumpet war coming, how can we prepare? Well, first you can prepare in some ways physically. I've had people say, hey, I've got $100,000, what do I invest my money in? Well, I'm not a financial investor. I don't know what really at this point to tell you what to invest your money in to sustain you through those times. We don't know what the economy is going to look like at that point. But sure, you could maybe store up some food and this, that, and the other. Or there might be some ways you could prepare your house and get ready in case within a 20 or 30 mile radius you had a nuclear bomb go off. Seriously, there are people that think about that. There's lots of research been done. And there are ways that if a bomb went off down here in Dallas, a nuclear bomb, there are ways I could prepare my house. We're located in Plano. There are ways we could prepare Endtime Ministries to increase our chances of survival up to 90%. Tape doorways and do a lot of different things. I've actually got some stuff put together that could help you physically prepare. If you'd like for me to send that to you, email me, drobbins@endtime.com. I had a guy put it together for me, and it's really good. And obviously, if you're at ground zero and a nuclear bomb goes off, we're going to see you in glory land. But there are things you can do. There's some basic food items you could store up. They say that if you can sustain yourself from 3 to 5 days, even 2 weeks would be good, but 3 to 5 days, if you can stay indoors for at least the 3-day period, you increase your chances of survival greatly. So I've got some information put together on that physically. The number one way, though, is prepare yourself spiritually. Make sure that you're right with the Lord in case you should be called home, even today. The Bible says this is the day of salvation. But no matter what, if you're living through the times just ahead, make sure you're prepared spiritually. And this is the most critical thing I've talked about. Even if I could somehow prepare myself physically, I've got to prepare myself spiritually for eternity, because I might live through these times just ahead. You never know. I might live through the whole thing. But I've got to make sure I'm ready to go should the Lord call me home. And so the plan of salvation is called being born again. If you don't know how to be born again or what that even means, go to endtime.com. It's right there in the middle of the page. What does it mean to be born again? Or email me, drobbins@endtime.com. I'll send you a free brochure.
End of the Age is a production of Endtime Ministries. This broadcast will be available on our website, endtime.com, in the archives section. On our website, you'll also find more information about how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. To reach our operators, call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. Endtime Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to our partners who made this broadcast possible. To do what Matthew 24:14 said, to reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom.